Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Great. Well,
Yes.
welcome to today's Artful Philanthropy Series discussion on fostering future museum leaders. It's a pleasure to have each of you joining us today for this virtual panel discussion. My name is Michelle Young, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to what promises to be an insightful and engaging conversation. The Artful Philanthropy Series is a series of seminars, curator talks, and panel presentations focused on providing the Ringling community with valuable resources related to estate planning, family philanthropy, and charitable giving and its impact on arts and culture. Today's program will feature a range of perspectives and insightful stories from current and past Ringling interns and fellows. But before we dive in, I want to extend my gratitude to our moderator and panelists for generously sharing their time and expertise with us today. Your contributions are invaluable, and I have no doubt that our audience will benefit greatly from your insights. Today's moderator is Dr. Jay Boda, Associate Director of Academic Affairs and Collections here at the Ringling. Jay's research and interests include visitor-centered curation, museum education, transmedia storytelling, reflective judgment, and museum professional development. He supervises the Ringling's academic programs and in-residence student interns enrolled in the Museum and Cultural Heritage Studies and Educuration programs. Finally, I encourage everyone to actively participate in the discussion. Your comments and questions are vital to our discussion, and we will be having time at the end of our talk today to hopefully get to everyone's questions. So without further ado, let's embark on this journey of discovery together. I hope you find today's panel both enlightening and inspiring. Thank you, and let's get started. Jay, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate your introduction and opening the opportunity for the Artful Philanthropy series to recognize and highlight Ringling fellowships and internships, our topic for today. And so to introduce our panelists, I'll just read off names and titles, but then I'll give everyone an opportunity just to briefly introduce themselves. Today's panel includes former Ringling interns and fellows, the first being Ivy Billier, the Education and Engagement Manager at the Museum of Fine Arts in St. Petersburg, Florida. Then we have Javon Brown, the inaugural Eleanor Merritt Fellow here at the Ringling, currently serving in that role. We also have Dr. Sarah Cartwright, the Ringling's Chief Curator, and Ula R. Searing Curator of Collections, again here at the Ringling. Also with us today is Charlie Farrell, the Romare Bearden Fellow at the St. Louis Art Museum here in St. Louis, Missouri. And also joining us from Atlanta, Georgia is Kyle Mancuso, the Curatorial Research Associate at the High Museum. So Ivy, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Ivy Billier, as you said. I'm the Education and Engagement Manager at the Museum of Fine Arts, St. Petersburg. The education team creates and produces, K through 12 programming, as well as adult programming. This looks like speaker events or summer camp and special community events. We also manage interns in our volunteer program, which includes docents, community outreach, and school tours. And yeah, so I sort of do that at the MFA here in St. Pete.
Thank you. Javon, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you're doing at the Ringling.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Javon Brown. I'm the Eleanor Merritt Fellow at the Ringling Museum of Art. My role specifically here is training under Dr. Jay Boda, doing museum operational training, academic affairs, and sharing the fellowship to community members. A lot of my day-to-day work deals with training under curatorial, collections, archives, community engagement, and working across different museum functions.
Wonderful. Dr. Sarah Cartwright, our Chief Curator, can you just give us a brief introduction to yourself, please?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sarah Cartwright. I'm the Chief Curator, and I'm responsible for the European collection here at the museum. So Yes, what you see in the gallery and the photo behind me, those are the galleries, the 21 original galleries of the Museum of Art. Those are the ones which display our historic collection that is under my responsibility.
Wonderful, thank you. Charlie Farrell, please introduce yourself.
I am the 2022-2024 Romare Beering Graduate Museum Fellow at the St. Louis Art Museum in St. Louis, Missouri. It's a fellowship really dedicated for early career museum professionals to get a better understanding of what they would like to do in museums. And so under my fellowship, I do a lot of curatorial work, but I also work closely with learning and engagement. So I do tours for children, I do public programs, I give lectures, I give talks internally and externally. Most recently, I did a presentation with the Environmental Protection Agency in Washington, D.C., which was really exciting. And so it just provides me with a wealth of experiences and opportunities.
Wonderful. And finally, Kyle Mancuso, please introduce yourself.
Hi, yes, thank you. I am Kyle Mancuso. I work at the High Museum of Art in Atlanta, which is where I was raised. So it's kind of like a little homecoming for me. I'm a curatorial research associate, which means I work in curatorial under a number of the collecting departments, helping to assemble exhibitions, helping with research, with content production. And then a little bit of permanent collection stuff as well. So.
Wonderful. Thank you all for joining us today. Each one of you have had ringling experiences, I think, that have are either currently or in the past have led you to your current positions. And what we're going to do today is kind of explore your the paths that led each one of our panelists to the ringling, and then for those that have gone on to other positions, how the ringling experiences helped promote and make them more competitive in becoming these early career professionals that they are, and get them into bigger and better stages of their professions. But before I jump into panel questions, I also want to recognize Fran Tigner, who is working also with me in academic affairs. She's going to be helping us with the Zoom logistics, but then if anybody in the audience has questions as we have this discussion with our panelists, please, if you would, put your questions into the chat for Zoom, and then towards the end of our presentation today, Fran will help lead that discussion of Q&A. So jumping in to our questions, without further ado, I'd just like each one of our panelists to share your journey. You may or may not be at the ringling today, but you were a whole person with an educational journey. Maybe there was former internships or fellowships in your past that led you to the ringling. Could you share a little bit about what that journey looked like, and what brought you to the ringling? So with that, let's start with Ivy.
Hey, so I attended Florida State University for my undergraduate degree, where I majored in art and history with a minor in museum studies. I then pursued my master's degree with the following year, like I jumped straight into it at FSU in art history, but I took the museum and cultural heritage studies route. And that track and route involved 1 year on campus doing coursework and a second year in Sarasota at the Ringling doing an internship. And also taking a course with Jay for my second year. So that's sort of how I fell into the internship program.
Okay, wonderful. We'll go to Charlie next, please. Charlie, tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, so Ivy and I were actually in the same cohort. We were in the same graduating class. I'm actually from the St. Pete area, and so the Ringling Museum is something that's been in my psyche for a very long time. As my path to the Ringling, I stayed in contact with a former professor, Dr. Kristen Dowell, who really encouraged me to pursue my master's degree. And so I applied for the MCHS program, Museum and Cultural Heritage Studies program. And a large draw for that program for me was the opportunity to do hands-on training at the Ringling Museum, which is the State Museum of Florida, which is just a wonderful opportunity. I mean, it's like the biggest museum in the immediate area. And so that's really what drew me to the Ringling, just the opportunity to be in a space that I had really looked up to and held in high regard for a long time.
Wonderful, thank you. Yes, Ivy and Charlie being part of the FSU Museum and Cultural Heritage Studies program, I think is a really important aspect of sharing what we do here at the Ringling. We're aligned with the Florida State program, that particular program at Florida State, and that Ringling track is an optional second year for those MCHS students to consider. And if they like, they can come down to the Ringling and do this academic year, fall and spring, as the culmination of their master's degree. I believe, as Ivy mentioned, they do a couple of different components. They take graduate courses at the Ringling. Then there's an internship portion where in the fall they rotate through the different departments of the Ringling, so they get introductions to a variety of skills like archives, curatorial, collections, education. That's expanded into events now, as well as marketing, and on a case-by-case basis, on the interest of the intern, we try to get them also connected to development team members as well, because that actually kind of helps complete the life cycle of what happens in museum operations, where much of our funding occurs or originates is in that development team process. So those two team members, or those internships, are really vital introductions to those experiences for students. Moving over to the fellowship route, Javon Brown is our Eleanor Merritt Fellow, a different kind of experience. Javon, can you share your journey and how you came to the Ringling?
Yeah, I think my journey was kind of unorthodox from most. So I recently graduated from the Rhode Island School of Design, where I majored in textiles. And specifically, I was intending on going on a track that was more centered around fashion and commercial design. But after my senior year, I gave it a little bit of thought. I applied for the Ringling Eleanor Merritt Fellowship because I had a connection to Sarasota and to also the Ringling at some point. And I honestly thought it was like one of the best opportunities that I could have had post-grad, to kind of just jump into a whole new field and learn and start from the ground level without any knowledge. And I feel really grateful that and blessed to like have the opportunities to come to the Ringling and start from ground zero and kind of like build my skills from a different professional field.
And also a former Ringling Fellow is Kyle Mancuso. Kyle, can you share a little bit about your journey to the Ringling?
Yes, so I have worked in a variety of museums, had worked in a variety of museums before my time at the Ringling. And at the time I applied, I was working at Christie's in New York in the Antiquities department, and was really looking for something a little more rigorous in way of research. Nothing to slight Christie's, but I was looking for something that, again, not only that I could become comfortable with a permanent collection, but engage with a broader public as well. So, and I think like my friend's mom sent me this thing, and she's like, have you ever thought about moving to Florida? And I was like, no, I have not. And I applied, and I can't have been sort of happier about that. I wanted to be working with European objects. I come from a background, I have a history degree, an Italian studies degree. So this was an opportunity for me to make a very clear sort of, like Javon, my path to art history was somewhat unorthodox, having degrees in history and literature. And working with Sarah, I was really able to sort of hone my art history skills, learn many things for the first time. And then of course, the Ringling's excellent collection made it wonderful, and location as well. So.
Love it. And so you just mentioned that you had worked with Sarah. Sarah, as our chief curator here at the Ringling, you also had a path and a journey to the Ringling, and I believe that included a fellowship. So can you share your journey and how you came to be the Ringling's chief curator, please?
Very, very digested version. I spent middle school and high school in Sarasota, and the Ringling was a big piece of my life, and for sure the reason I decided to pursue art history in college. So I always felt close to the Ringling, but I was away pursuing my graduate education. And so by the time I came back here, I had already finished my PhD in art history and had relocated to this area for family reasons and was looking to work at the Ringling. And this research fellowship was available at the time I was looking, and I ended up taking it. Even though I had already worked full-time at the Met, I'd had other full-time museum jobs prior. This was an opportunity for me to work here in a place I loved with people, some of whom I already knew. And it was a great opportunity. I got to do pretty much full-time research supporting Virginia Brilliant's catalog of Italian, Spanish, and French paintings. So got to beef up our files and really become her right hand in that project, and that was a wonderful experience. And then just have had subsequent positions here at the museum until now.
Incredible. Thank you. Also, I don't want to spring it on her, but I feel like I would be very remiss if I didn't ask Michelle Young, who's our director of development here at the Ringling. She has a fellowship. She wasn't a Ringling fellow, but she had a pretty significant fellowship story herself, which I think is germane to our conversation. So Michelle, would you share your fellowship journey, please?
Sure. I kind of knew you were going to ask me to do this. So I actually have been at the Ringling 8 years, but many years ago, I was the 2010-2011 Romare Bearden Fellow at the St. Louis Art Museum. So it's the same fellowship program that Charlie is now going through. And it was an incredible opportunity for me to do exactly as what Jay and the other panelists have mentioned, to have the exposure to the museum career, understanding the various departments, their importance, and how they work together. So yeah, I love this conversation because it's very near and dear to my heart, obviously.
Yeah, I was really pleased when Charlie accepted the invitation to participate in today's panel, because that meant we were going to have 2 Romare Bearden Fellows as part of our conversation today. And I'll just be very transparent with our audience today. I'm a former Ringling intern. As you may have seen in some of the photos that were rotating through in our pre-show intern fellow slideshow. I did an internship almost 10 years ago at the Ringling as part of my graduate studies in museum education. Prior to that experience, I did my graduate coursework at Florida State University. I was part of the museum education and visitor-centered curation program, a PhD program up there at Florida State, and they offer the opportunity to come down to the Ringling as to do a 1-semester internship. And so I worked in the education department and my primary focus was with docents or guides and volunteers. And that was my research area. And I eventually ended up doing my research and data collection at the Ringling as part of my dissertation. So the Ringling is, I think, a real critical proving ground, skill set builder, and also kind of a sandbox for me as far as like some of my earliest experiences is like honing my skills as part of what I do as a museum professional. So I think with everybody's comments, it's we've demonstrated, and I hear this every single time I ask, what's your professional journey, what's your path to become an early or a museum professional? It's always very different. People come from all different kinds of walks of life, different paths. Some go straight from school right into a particular position, or they wander outside of the museum and do some other experiences before they come perhaps back to the museum. So it's very different, but I think internships and fellowships are a definite critical step in building some of those core skills that make us competitive, and it puts us into a position of knowledge and building our expertise to step into roles right away and be able to do the jobs we do. So with speaking about the jobs that we're doing here at the Ringling as part of the interns and the fellowship in those internship and fellowship roles, can we move to the question about, what kind of projects did you do while you were an intern and or a fellow that helped you develop as a museum professional? What were some of those critical moments in your time at the Ringling as either an intern or a fellow? So with that, we'll start with Charlie this time. Charlie, can you share a little bit about some of those significant projects or skills that you built while you were at the Ringling?
Absolutely. So one of the big projects I worked on when I started was the Rodney Desir project. And so she's a Haitian Canadian artist who was working with the Ringling to do a performance, a cultural component with Booker High School, which is a local performing arts high school in Sarasota, and an exhibition. And that was really impactful for me because something I've always been very clear about in my path towards museum work is I want to work with Black contemporary artists. And so it was just wonderful to just kind of be thrown into this. And I worked with Elizabeth Dowd, the curator of performance at the Ringling. And so this was also an opportunity to think about curation in a different space. And what does it mean to work with living artists outside of the standard curatorial purview? So I did a lot of work with Sonia and Elizabeth to help get the project ready for the Booker High students. I also did a lot of prep work for the exhibition. I don't know if anyone remembers me cutting out the black tie backs in the classroom. And I also did a lot of general day-to-day with Elizabeth in performance, which is, when you come into museum work, I think most people are very used to seeing the end product and the exciting end product, but there's a lot that goes into that. And so it was nice to kind of ground myself. And if this is something I really want to do, I'm going to have to get used to the paperwork. I'm going to have to get used to doing contracts. I'm going to have to get used to being organized. And that's okay to do the things that are less exciting because they allow you to propel yourself to the exciting things and see a project to completion from start to finish.
Wonderful. Ivy, as another one of our MCHS interns, can you share a little bit about your experience at the Ringling and some of those significant moments that helped you build some skills that led to your current position?
Yeah, so while I was at the Ringling, I had the chance to do one-on-one mentorship sessions with Ola, who's the modern and contemporary curator there. And so I was able to sort of shadow her through like 2 exhibitions that were pretty significant. There was As Long as There's Sun, As Long as There's Light. And I sort of helped her with installation. She would show me like her thought process and how she would go about curating that type of space. And then at that time where you were working on Reclaiming Home, contemporary seminal art, which hadn't come out yet. And so I was able to work, and we got to do some initial research and development. One of the artists' interviews that were included in the publication that came out, I got to sort of be the scribe for that, but sit in on the interview and see how that works. And, put together that interview and, switch it around. Like it's not going to look the same from beginning to the book, actually. And so both those projects gave me sort of curatorial assistant experience, which I ended up using as a curatorial assistant, a job straight out of grad school. And then I also assisted with other projects like community outreach. And so I had the chance to do the Collard Green Festival there in Sarasota and do some outreach for the K through 12 programming. Worked as a performer liaison for the musical performance events, such as Noche Cubana Dance Party with Sema Funk, which turned out to be like a really amazing event. People were dancing in the gardens, and the live music and sort of showing the performers around was really cool. And then also creating proposals for potential teen programs and was really awesome, and a functional purpose for the Ringlings offsite community gallery that they have. I know that's still in limbo, but it was cool to touch on a bunch of different things, whether that was education or curatorial. So those were some of the major projects that I got to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And the offsite location you mentioned, Ivy, is located in Newtown. It's in development currently to be built out. Your work continues, and we're working with community leaders in Newtown to further develop that, identify needs, and create a space that supports that community. We're excited for that. Kyle, as one of our former fellows, can you talk about your work at the Ringling? I know you primarily worked with Sarah, but can you describe some of your projects and some of those significant moments, please?
Sure. So I came on, I think, in the summer of 2019, and the sort of mandate was to help with the ongoing reinstallation of the original 21 galleries. And so what we started with was Gallery 21, which is the photo behind Sarah right now in her Zoom, and that was sort of my introduction to the Ringling's wonderful collection, staff. And so we were able to complete this. Of course, 2020 came around. COVID meant that we were at home and we weren't necessarily able to realize some of this reinstallation project, some of our larger vision, but it meant that I had plenty of time to sort of continue to do research. So a lot of what I was doing was helping Sarah with object research, with provenance research, where we got our objects from. Many of them come, of course, from John Ringling, but their paths to him can be complicated and important to sort out, and interesting to sort out. I mean, I think a lot of good stories spring from where objects have come from, whose hands they've passed through. So some of the other things that I was able to do over my 2 years, I wrote labels and sort of reframed the Hirazi statues, the bronze statues that are in the courtyard. I also was able to give sort of presentations about a number of things. Again, during COVID, I sort of ramped up my presentations because it was something that everyone could sort of do to pass the time. And so I spoke about some tapestries, about some sculptures as well. And so again, these are all very sort of in Sarah's field, historic European art, as well as American art. I was able to go to, in the sort of brief time before COVID, I was able to go to New York to visit some archives to help us understand some of the elements in Gallery 21, some of the structural elements in Gallery 21. But I also did a number of things that are sort of outside my field. So I ended up co-curating a small show, which I think is still up. I'm not actually sure. I haven't been back in a while. But on Dewa porcelains, of which the Ringling has a great. I'm getting a nod. That makes me feel like it's still up. So that's good. That's good to know. But again, these are things that I had been exposed to, but had never been asked by an art handler. You know, where do you want this 3D object to go? And you start realizing how many decisions have to be made, and some of them you can make ahead of time, and some of them you can't. You don't know until you get into that space. So again, those are I think crucial experiences that you can't get at every institution, and that are sort of crucial to someone who wants to be in the museum field. So yeah.
That exhibition's still up, and
Fabulous.
Some of my favorite moments when I walk around campus sharing our galleries is like when I point out work where either interns or fellows have been directly involved. One that is ongoing, continuing, is in our historic galleries. A former MCHS intern from several years ago, Lacey Barber, she was involved with our circus curator, Jennifer Lemmer Posey, and created, as part of her internship capstone research project, an exhibition called Extraordinary Bodies. And that exhibition continues because we'd had enough, it's works on paper, and but we had enough of those materials that that exhibition continues. So it's always exciting to share those stories. Javon Brown, you're one of our current fellows here on staff at the Ringling. You started in August last year. Go ahead and share some of those significant projects or moments during your time at the Ringling for us, please.
Yeah, I feel like there's been so many significant moments for learning and development for me here so far, but I'll just keep it short and brief. I feel like a lot of the projects centered around community engagement, communicating with multiple community partners and doing outreach. So back in December, I did a project with Booker High School students with environmental ambassadors, as well as like 2 environmental organizations and health organizations, MHI and Sarasota Waterkeepers. And so I got to put together an art contest for high school students and had the work juried by Ringling staff members, Elizabeth Dowd, as well as Caitlin Shanley, our community outreach coordinator. And so we had three winners for that award, and that work got presented at the Eco Summit here at the Van Wezel Performing Arts Center. And so that was an international conference where people from around the world were all convening in Sarasota to talk about environmental issues. And it was a great opportunity to have high school artists present their work at this conference. And I feel like that was a really good opportunity for me to kind of learn like logistics and planning and a lot of communication and emails and, things falling through, like really having to over communicate and have a backup and a plan B. I think those steps I really took, and that was the first project that I really worked on that really gave me those skills. And so for my next project, I got to experience what's recently last week, actually, where I hosted a listen and learn program for community members and potential donors for the Eleanor Merritt Fellowship, where I invited people in the community to come and learn and listen about what I've been working on as the fellow and what the fellowship is all about. Coming in, I kind of like, I felt like I was learning as I was going, and being the first fellow, there isn't really a guidebook, so I'm kind of creating it as I go. And I feel like that was a great opportunity for me to kind of just give people an opportunity to listen and hear what I had to say about all the activities with community engagement, what I'm learning about like in our strategic planning meetings, like how do we create policy that lasts and keeps our institutions like ongoing into the future, and how do we create lasting impact within our communities and like have futures where diverse communities can be engaged in our institutions. I think that's really important when we talk about like equity and inclusion, and having pipeline programs like my fellowship to propel and to invite diverse candidates into the museum field.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Javon, as well as that your fellowship is directly related to a lot of our initiatives connected in our strategic plan as well. That helps us definitely make stronger connections in our community and make forward progress on those goals connected to, yes, absolutely, equity and inclusion in the museum field. Sarah, can you share from your staff perspective, from that curatorial perspective, and maybe speak on behalf of curatorial on that idea of like how interns and fellows connect to the work that curators do, but maybe even just speak on the staff perspective as far as like how they support us and our research and our overall museum operations. I know even Javon connected with our collections department and was involved during your latest exhibition, Shanique Smith Parade.
Sure, I think we really welcome the involvement of interns and fellows, not only because it helps us with our work, but I think all of us see the need to give young people who are interested in museum work and hands-on experience and exposure to the kinds of things we do, because it is really hard to know what goes on behind the scenes, as many of you have already said. What does the work really consist of? And to a certain extent, you can study it, and the Museum and Cultural Heritage Studies program at FSU is a good example. But it's also something you kind of have to learn on the job. And I think that is one of the things that we want to make sure is that we are continuing to develop a pipeline of museum professionals. It's not an easy field to break into, and a lot of people don't even know about it. So I think as a way to ensure the future of our museum, just as Javon was saying, how do we continue to make sure this place will last and serve our public, our widest public possible for years to come? Interns and fellows have a really big part to play. I think from the perspective of just extra hands, extra research, extra just even having an intern for a short time or a fellow for a short time, it's almost it's hard to overstate how much that help really helps. It really serves us and makes it possible for each of us as curators to do a whole lot more. So I'm very appreciative of all the interns and fellows, their interest and their hard work, and very proud to see so many of them doing such wonderful things in other places and continuing their journey in our field.
Absolutely. Yeah, the projects, anytime, when I coordinate internships especially, but all the fellowships as well, there's, a practical project that's behind it that the staff put together, that it's of need. It's an operational need for the museum to carry out, but staff do the legwork, that mental exercise of like, how can we develop and scaffold the lessons to bring in an intern or a fellow into those areas to not only carry out the work, but also create those foundational build on those foundational skills, so that we're training that next generation, but also getting our museum work done. So thank you for highlighting that, Sarah. So for the next question, I'm going to kind of ask two questions in one, because I see the clock and we're kind of winding down, or we're getting close to time, and I want to make sure we have opportunity to answer questions that the audience might have. If, again, anyone in the audience, if you have questions, just drop them in the chat. But the kind of like the two questions in one, if you would kind of think about, your time at the Ringling and the skills that you developed. How did that prepare you for that next step after the Ringling, or into whatever you might be planning, in your case, Javon, next after your fellowship? But like, how did those professional experiences, those critical moments at the Ringling, how do they prepare you to take those next steps in your career? And then also think about, if you knew now, or if you knew then what you know now, what would you what kind of advice would you give to any aspiring intern or fellow that, again, like Sarah was mentioning, it can be difficult to break into the field sometimes, and I think interns and fellowships create the critical experience and makes those people so much more competitive, because they can say, I have these projects in my resume, I have those hard skills that I can offer. But again, kind of like to summarize the question, what kind of skills launched you into your current position, and what kind of advice would you give aspiring interns or fellows wanting to get into the field? And let's see, we'll start with Ivy. Let's go with you.
As far as what has sort of prepared me, and what skills I've learned, I guess two things. One is, like Sarah sort of tapped on is that you really need that hands-on experience. And I think having that hands-on experience and having done that through the internship, done certain things, it gives you the confidence to go into another institution and either propose an idea or even do it. And I think a lot of times when you're doing interviews for a job, or you're working with some new colleagues, they just want to know that you have the capacity to do something, or at least, to do it. I think that's one thing for sure that has really prepared me for my career now. And then also the Ringling has set me up with a supportive network that I can always reference and go back to. I'm privileged because I stayed in the Tampa Bay area. So I can run over to Jay if I need to and be like, hey, I have a question. Or Jay and Ola are like were references on my resume. But I can text, I see Emma in the chat, not to call her out, but I can text, Emma, Helen, Ola, and say, like, I just want advice, or how have you seen this work in your museum? And that network gives you, even more confidence to, pursue your career and act it out and everything. As far as things not based off of now that I know, knowing what I know now, I would say that I sort of did this because our program was built out like it, I think. But, when you're in your internship, do the thing you're interested in to become an expert at what your interest is, but also try everything. Because now you have, you have that broad sense and experience. When you're applying for jobs out of your fellowship or your internship, sometimes you just need a job, and sometimes you need to pay bills and you have loans to pay off or whatever it might be. But sure, I have this curatorial assistant experience, but I did a lot of projects within education that helped me where I am now. And so having tried everything, it gave me a lot more experience.
It made you more competitive, I imagine, as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
How about you? Ringling experience propelled you to the Romare Bearden Fellowship in some way, in some capacity, I imagine. Talk a little more about that.
Yeah, so I would say at the Ringling, what was most impactful, I guess I was doing real work. I'm not sure how to phrase that better, but I was I was responsible, and I was the point person for a lot of the projects that I was working on. So if something didn't happen, it came on me, and that kind of I was assisting, but a lot of like the day-to-day, like it came down to me and what I was doing. And so I think that encouraged and pushed me to like it starts and ends with me. So how am I going to be responsible? How am I going to be a professional in this space? How, like, I want my colleagues to be able to rely on me, even though I am an intern. A value that I look that's very near and dear to my heart is that I don't want to create more work for my colleagues. And so being very intentional the first time, being thorough the first time, is something that I think I really honed at the Ringling, that I would say propelled me and helped position me and make me competitive for the Romare Bearden Fellowship. I mean, it's a very competitive fellowship because there can only be one. And it's got a long established history. So I'm the 30th fellow. The fellowship started in 1991. So, there are a lot of people who, and because the fellowship is so established, you can see the trajectory of everyone who's had the fellowship. And so for me, it's like, oh, this would be a wonderful opportunity because everyone who's had this job before me has gone on to do very wonderful, amazing things. And so how can I position myself in a way that would cement me in a legacy of just wonderful colleagues? And so taking your work very seriously is something I think I took away, and just think creatively. Something I learned is things never go as you think they'll go, especially in museums. And so being flexible and being open to a plan B and just being able to pivot very, very quickly. And so advice that I would give to an incoming fellow intern, just be confident. You got the job because they thought you could do the job. And so you should proceed as if you can do the job. Yes, this is a learning opportunity, but you are a professional. And so you should, move in a space as if you are a professional and just move with confidence. I think this is these internships and fellowships, I think, are wonderful because they build your confidence as a professional, but you got the job because they knew you could do it.
I love it. Excellent advice. Thank you, Charlie. Javon, your skills are going to launch you to the next step. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so my background is I have a BFA in textiles. So positioning myself as a professional artist in the future. I think working at the Ringling, I've developed a lot of skills where I'm learning about collaboration and timelines and deadlines and like how do you work with larger institutions when it comes to exhibiting work from artists. I feel like I can take those skills on in my next position, either by consulting or mentoring younger artists who probably don't have the support, who probably don't have the education background that I have. And to give them like the confidence to be able to like, this is how you present your work as a professional artist, and also broadening my network and my reach across the Ringling and across different institutions. I feel like I've been able to like leverage that in my Ringling position, which has been a really great opportunity for me as well. I feel like I would say embrace every opportunity that comes. I rarely say no to things when I'm here, and sometimes that can be a bad thing, but like I feel like I'm always willing to put myself in an uncomfortable position to learn and to do the uncomfortable things. So I feel like that's something I would give advice to an incoming intern and fellow. Like don't be afraid to be uncomfortable, because that might push you into the next best thing.
Excellent. Thank you. Kyle, how about you? Your Ringling experience took you to the High Museum. Talk about how that experience got you there.
Sure. So I'd say beyond sort of honing some of these art historical research skills and presentation skills that, again, I was exposed to before the Ringling, but really working with Sarah so closely helped me realize what are the things that I really want to do. Thinking more intentionally about how I wanted to present myself in museum fields, how I wanted to contribute to an institution. One of the great things I think that the Ringling prepared me for that I don't see happening in a lot of institutions is that I think its size and sort of everything that it offers, despite its sort of familiar size. I mean, I knew everyone and in a rather short time, but the things that it offers you, the resources that you have, allow you to do the things that you want to do, the kind of craziest dreams that you might have. We have a library, and they can get you anything that you need. I mean, you just send an email, and a book would show up a couple of weeks later. There's a number of books on site already. And then the same goes for conservation. I was working, one of the things that I had not really had any exposure to was working with conservators. A lot of institutions don't have on-site conservators. And the fact that the conservation lab was just downstairs made a huge difference. So I don't know if Emily in conservation is on the call, but I remember very distinctly her and I going down and looking at some glass pieces, early 20th century Venetian glass, and all of these sort of weird experimental things that they're doing means that there's some strange sort of bubbles happening in this glass. There's stuff that looks like dirt, but like we're not sure what this is. And learning to sort of collaborate with conservators. I feel like, and now in my current job, I am in charge of this grant that we got to conserve a large portion of our collection. We're putting up these sort of mini installations about it. We have all this content coming out about it. And again, I mean, that's just not something that I would have known how to do, known how to manage, had it not been for that sort of close collaboration. The feeling that I could just dip in and out of the conservation lab, ask a quick question, it made all the difference. So what I would say for, knowing what I know now, I sort of echoing what others have said. I think the other great thing specifically about the Ringling too is that there's so much that we have done, that the Ringling has done, but there's so much to do. Again, I mean, the amount of works in the collection that even if they've been published, even if they've been researched, there's always something more to learn. So taking advantage of this kind of excess of work to sort of sink into, I think, no one's going to say no. Don't find out. Don't learn more about our collection. So that was really what sort of has helped me moving forward, because I approach now in my current position trying to sort out like, what is this thing that no one really knew we had, but how can it be interesting to our visitors and to us as an institution? So yeah.
Wonderful. Yes, the sentiment that you just shared, Kyle, and others have shared. I always, at the very beginning of the orientations that I offer, I always say, squeeze the sponge. There's so much at the Ringling to do, and use us as an opportunity to learn as much as you can while you're here. I love that. Sarah, do you have any advice, for a fellow or an intern that would be coming to the Ringling? What would you say is like, what would from your perspective, what might you suggest?
Well, having heard what everyone else says, what I say falls in line with that, for sure, being open to many different things and opportunities. I think that's true throughout anyone's career. I think throughout, especially when you're young and developing your career, but also I think this is a place where, what Charlie talked about with taking responsibility, sort of recognizing she could be the point person for these projects and wanting to step up, and that was possible here. And that was absolutely true. That happened, and that's not always the case in a museum setting, in an internship setting or a fellowship setting. But I think, you can here, there's room for that for people in internship and fellowship programs to take on a serious measure of responsibility and then have an enormous sense of achievement, and because they contributed so greatly to a project. And I think if you come in with that mindset, as Charlie mentioned, that confidence that you're going to make a serious contribution, you can. And I think that's one of the great things about this place. And Kyle, of course, did the same. I mean, absolutely gave him things to do and said, here, go figure this out. I don't know the answer. We need to know now. And he would come back with it. So
Wonderful. I see we're really closing in on time, so I think we need to turn it over to questions and answers. Fran, if you would, can you lead us through any of the questions that were asked, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jay, and thanks, everyone. The first question I see in here is a two-part question for everyone. The question asks, what were some of the challenges in your internship or fellowship programs that you experienced? And how did your interactions working with Ringling programs support you through these challenges?
Great question. Anybody want to just jump in? We might not be able to get to everybody, but anything that really just jumps out at anybody, feel free to respond.
I can jump in. So with Rodney this year, when I started, there had been legislation change on what could be talked about in high schools. And Rodney Desir's project dealt specifically with the history of the transatlantic slave trade. Like, she was literally tracing her lineage through different islands, like through a boat trip. And the project with Booker High School was sort of a condensed version of that for them. And so that was a challenge. But during that process, leaning heavily on Elizabeth and Sonia, because I was doing a lot of the editing and revising for the little booklet that was going to the high school, but leaning heavily on staff. And I think being honest and saying, I'm not sure what I'm doing, can you help me, was a really invaluable experience. Because the other thing is, if you really aren't sure, you should just ask the question. And it's okay if staff aren't sure, because they can ask the question, but being open to having that conversation, and making sure that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing so you can further support the mission and the goals of a project, I think would be really important.
Yeah, I think what you also highlight is, it's not only just a museum, we're a state museum with the requirements to be consistent with state laws. And so, being exposed to some of those dilemmas that presents, I think, can be very instructive for our interns and fellows in their early careers. Learning how to navigate those situations is a really important key moment. Thank you for highlighting that. Any other challenges that anyone wants to highlight?
Well, I'll go and say that I you know, museums are very interesting for the way that they are positioned, which is usually outside of academia. And you have this opportunity to sort of engage with the broader public, and yet you are trained in these academic backgrounds. So one of the challenges is always like, well, how do I convey this message about this object, about this artist, about this story, that's accessible but sort of rooted in this research that I've learned how to do in school and all of that. So I think one of the things that I'm still learning. I mean, I think it's one of those things that you continue to kind of try new approaches to, is, when you're writing a label, you have like 95 words, and like, what are you going to say? Like, how are you going to get this story across to a large audience? How are you going to keep them engaged, and how are you going to say something meaningful? And I remember coming in early on at this job, and we were writing labels for Gallery 21, and I was like, what if I used like a footnote here? And I just, I was quickly learning. I was like, this is a different kind of procedure. This is reaching a different audience, and I think it's a continuing challenge, but one that's sort of fun to negotiate in all of these situations. Again, like I said, we looked into the provenance of objects quite often, and that itself could be a story that people can get into. So trying to tell these different stories about very different objects in very different contexts that have now been pulled out of their contexts, their original contexts, is always a challenge.
Taking theory and put it into practice, yes. Key skill set for sure, absolutely. We're kind of at time, and what I'd like to do to kind of close us out today is just I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists for an amazing conversation. You're all excellent representatives of the Ringling. I really appreciate your participation. Very impressive, and again, the variety of perspectives has been very just a tonic to listen to. I just really enjoy listening to all the things that everybody's been doing. But I would like to give everybody an opportunity to kind of like tout what you're doing in your current positions, those upcoming projects that you might want to highlight to our audience. You guys are doing such amazing work across your various areas. Please share a little bit, just a brief moment of like what's next on your radar that you want our audience to know about. Ivy, we'll start with you, please.
I'll just highlight an upcoming exhibition that I think everybody here at the MFA is really excited about. May 18th, we're opening the exhibition Never the Same Song. It's a collaboration between two artists, Lizzie Bagatzos and Lonnie Holly. They're both really interesting artists just because they work a lot in improv with found objects, but also as musicians too. And so there's going to be a few programming opportunities that come with it if you want to check it out online. One is there's like listening sessions at a bar here in St. Pete that I think is going to be really cool. So yeah, just maybe look up the exhibition Never the Same Song and stop by.
Definitely will check that out. Thank you, Ivy. Charlie, how about you? What's going on at SLAM?
So I am curating Romare Bearden residences, looking at Romare Bearden and his relationship to other artists in our permanent collection, and that will open May 3rd. And speaking of music, Ivy will be doing a opening event May 3rd, and we're going to be listening to jazz music that he may have been inspired by while I was working in his studio. So if you're in St. Louis, please come through. The show will be up through September 15th, and I'm also doing a Juneteenth panel celebrating freedom. So I'm working with 3 artists who are in this area, and we're going to be thinking about legacies of Juneteenth through their work. So emancipation, Black future specifically, and like how that relates to their work. And they're all working in very different mediums. Like one of them is a trained architect. So I'm very excited.
Incredible. Wow. Yes, absolutely. That sounds really great. Thanks. Kyle, how about you up in the high? What's going on there?
Sure, Ivy, I'm very happy to hear that you're going to be working with Lonnie Holly. We are about to show something for this conservation project. I was talking about a Lonnie Holly piece. Of course, he's working with non-traditional materials that degrade very quickly that are meant to degrade. So it sort of presents these conservation challenges that we then want to sort of use as this point of to talk about these objects and these artists who are doing very interesting things. As far as what else we're doing, a book that I am co-authoring about a Ukrainian-born self-taught artist who actually lived in Miami for a number of years. This is where he created his artwork. It should be coming out in the fall. So the exhibition has passed, unfortunately, so you can't go see that, but you could buy the book when it comes out. So
wonderful, amazing, great. Javon.
Yes, so I'm 4 months away from rounding out my fellowship, which is crazy. But next month I have a viewpoint lecture focusing on Shanique Smith's Parade, focusing with an emphasis on textile color materiality, which is a very near and dear topic to me. I'm a color nerd, like anything textiles related, like I'm on it. And so this is a really exciting project that I'll be working on, or presentation I'll be giving next month, May 3rd.
Fabulous, thank you.
As well.
Also, for the audience, you'll see Fran's dropping some links in the chat. So if you want to learn more, you can definitely do that. Sarah, I don't want to leave you out. You want to promote any particular aspect of your work or anything that's going on at the Ringling you want to highlight?
Well, we have a number of exhibitions opening in the next couple of months. Please check out our website and Reinstallation, which is part of what Kyle worked on with me, and he talked about. That project continues. We'll be moving forward. We have our gallery devoted to Cypriot antiquities from the permanent collection that will be coming online later this year. So we're excited about that.
Absolutely, yeah, that's going to be very exciting as well. I will promote one thing, and I'll promote the Eleanor Merrick Fellowship for year 24-25. Applications are open right now for that. The application window, I believe, is advertised to close next week, Monday, but I think I'm going to extend it a little bit. Applications are, if you read the website, you'll see it's closing on Monday next week, but I think I'm going to extend it by a week or two, just to give them a little more opportunity for people to apply. But it's an exciting opportunity. You heard it from yourself, from what Javon's been up to and everyone else. It's a great opportunity to dive in, learn about the field of museum work, and get some really practical hands-on experiences. So again, I want to say thank you to our amazing panelists today. It's been my pleasure to speak with all of you, and I'm just indebted to Michelle for opening up Artful Philanthropy to have this discussion. So again, thank you, Michelle, and I'll throw it to you to end our day today.
Thank you. Sorry, I could not get my unmute to work, but thank you all so much for your participation in today's program. I do want to say that we are thrilled to welcome 2 new fellowships that have just recently been established at the museum. One to directly support curatorial support for Sarah's area of our collection, as well as our circus. And we're very thankful for our generous donors who are greatly appreciated here, who support all avenues of our work here at the museum. But thank you all again. We hope to see you again on our next program. Thanks.